Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers for February 3rd, 2011, the 10th legislative day of the 2011 session. I'm Scott Slade. Coming up in tonight's program, details of a bill to toughen Georgia's illegal immigration laws are announced. Governor Nathan Deal says he supports the Sunday sales bill that passed a Senate committee yesterday. It's the end of the legislative week and we'll check in with Tom Crawford from the Georgia Report. We continue our leadership series. Tonight, House Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones, and we'll go in depth on that illegal immigration bill. I'll be joined in studio by Senator Nan Orrock. All that is coming up tonight on Primetime Lawmakers, but first, a Senate immigration bill with stiff penalties for employers who hire undocumented workers. And Wendy Lawson joins us live from the Capitol with the latest on Senate Bill 40. And Wendy.
Thanks so much, Scott. You know, Senator Jack Murphy told reporters this morning that the real question is, do you want immigration reform or not? Senate Bill 40 requires all employers, public and private sector, to confirm that they're not hiring undocumented workers by using the federal E-Verify system. Those who do not could be hit with fines, jail terms, and be forced to close their businesses. Senator Murphy says that not all government agencies and officials are complying with a 2006 state law that requires the use of E-Verify. So SB 40 penalizes elected officers, law enforcement officials, and agency heads who have illegal immigrants on their rolls, with up to $10,000 in fines, 1 year in jail, and removal from their positions or elected offices. Private businesses found in violation of the law would first be warned, then fined up to $10,000. On the third offense, the state would terminate their licenses.
Do not want to just go in and take a business license away from them and put them out of business. I want them to understand that this is a bill not to be punitive, but a bill to try to get them to verify who's working for them. And I don't, you know, people have a big problem with that, but some people have a big problem with it. But employers today, you have, in some cases, you have your employees drug tested. In some cases, you do background checks. I mean, you know, you're wanting to find out who's working for you. And that's what this does.
Governor Nathan Deal urges federal support for immigration regulation, pointing to the 287G program, which trains local law enforcement. But he says Washington has not done enough.
The reality is this. When the federal government fails to live up to its responsibilities to enforce immigration laws, which they have certainly failed to do, the cost of that is not borne by the federal government, by and large. The cost of it is borne by states and by local jurisdictions. I think it is only reasonable that those who are having to bear the cost of it do everything within their power to address it when the one who really has a responsibility simply abdicates that.
Immigration advocates acknowledge that there are costs borne by immigration, whether it is legal or not.
People actually have children. We know that. We understand that. So they go to schools. That means you got to build more schools. Although this year we've been closing schools because people have left. We also know that the poor use the emergency room as their insurance policy. Some immigrants are poor, so they go to the emergency room. And unfortunately, the federal government puts those demands on the state. Again, good leadership would say, let's go to Washington, D.C. and get our reimbursements for this. Because the bills that Murphy has drafted, both in the context of E-Verify and in the Show Me Your Papers section, where a police officer, if they develop a, quote, reasonable suspicion that somebody's illegal, can ask for immigration documents, is so unconstitutional that it shouldn't even see the light of day outside of a committee.
Senator Murphy, of course, doesn't see it that way.
I think this legislation will stand up to any challenges that might be presented if we are challenged in the federal court. I think it will stand up. Secondly, I don't know how you can compare cost when you're talking about the cost of illegal aliens in this state. I've been reported that it's $563 million just in education alone that is costing this state each and every year. Now, I would challenge you economically, if you'll bring me a company in tomorrow that'll give $563 million into our state coffers tomorrow, then I'll back off of this economic.
Senator Murphy also says the legislation will not place undue burden on the farming industry, which depends on seasonal workers. He says there are federal visa programs that will allow the continued hiring of temporary foreign workers. In other news, one day after a Senate committee gave its approval to a measure allowing voters at the local level to decide whether alcohol should be sold on Sundays, Governor Deal reaffirms his support for the referendum called for in Senate Bill 10.
I just simply believe that these are the kind of issues that communities can make their own judgments about what is appropriate for them. And I think we're past the time where at the state level we have the responsibility of micromanaging local issues. I consider this a matter of local control, and I trust the judgment of local communities to determine what they think is appropriate for their community. I don't drink, but I simply believe in democracy, and I think democracy manifests itself best when people are allowed to express their opinion at the ballot box.
SB 10 is currently in the Senate Rules Committee awaiting a vote by the full Senate. And on the House side today, Democrats introduce another bill from their legislative priority list. Representative Billy Mitchell sponsors the Homeowners Protection Act by giving homeowners the opportunity to make good on past due mortgage payments without bank approval. Representative Mitchell says the measure provides middle-class Georgians with rights they don't currently share with the rich.
Although you cannot modify the mortgage of your primary residence through bankruptcy, you can modify the mortgage of your vacation home, modify the terms of your personal yacht or private plane through bankruptcy.
A joint House-Senate Education Committee got a report from the governor's deputy chief of staff today about how the $400 million in the federal Race to the Top money is being spent. Aaron Hames told that committee that $19.4 million will be awarded to districts for innovations that close the student achievement gap, that teacher pay for performance would only occur after an evaluation tool is developed, and that educators who work in rural districts will qualify for signing bonuses. And finally tonight, the House and Senate paid tribute to former Peach County Representative Tony Sellier, who died of congestive heart failure in November. Not many dry eyes in the chamber where Representative Sellier served 2 terms, especially when his widow read in his own words about how he felt about coming from Venezuela and becoming an American citizen.
We'll never forget Tony. There'll always be a huge place in my heart and all of our hearts for Tony. And all I have to do is, I'm having a day that I'm wondering if it's too overwhelming or not fair, or I become not grateful. I just have to take a look in my mind's eye at that old mug and think, gosh, this is a great place. And we have some great friends that we meet here that will inspire us for our whole lifetime, not just our life here. Tony, if you're up there and you listen, buddy, we sure do love you. Thank you.
When you think of Tony, just remember this. You who have been born in America, I wish I could make you understand what it is like not to be an American, not to have been an American all your life. And then suddenly, with the words of a man in flowing robes, to be one. One moment, you belong with your fathers to a million dead yesterdays. The next, you belong with America to a million unborn tomorrows. May you all love life like Tony did. Thank you.
That was indeed a very touching memorial for Representative Sellier. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm in Wandy Lawson for Primetime Lawmakers.
Sounds like Representative Sellier was a special guy. Thank you very much for that, Wandy.
Good night.
And tonight's leadership segment, Wandy Lawson sits down with House Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones, who says managing the state's water resources is a top priority.
We need to expand our capacity, and we can't create more rain. But we do, and Georgia has pretty high rainfall compared to the rest of the country, over 50 inches. Our problem is where the rain, where the rivers begin is where the bulk of the population is, which is in the upper third of the state. And so the way to add capacity with that existing rainfall is through reservoirs. And a few years ago, Governor Perdue recommended that we do the same, but other budget priorities got in the way, and I think the mood has changed. And I expect that you'll see a legislature that will reaffirm what Governor Deal has recommended.
So the House has introduced the first piece of immigration reform legislation already this session. What do you see as being the significance of addressing immigration this year?
It matters, and as one who worked on the budget, it matters from a budget impact. For every student who is here illegally. It costs Georgia taxpayers thousands of dollars. It's impacting our emergency rooms, hitting our Medicaid and our doctors and our hospitals' costs. So we're not the federal government. We can't pretend that we can truly protect the borders, but what we can do, and I think it is important as stewards of taxpayers' dollars, and as folks who set policy to make Georgia a more attractive place to work and more jobs friendly, that we make Georgia a less attractive state for those who choose to come here illegally. You know, they're good people. We just can't afford to have all of them. A lot don't realize Georgia has more illegal residents in it than Arizona. Even though we are not a border state, we have historically been an attractive state because of our real estate and our agricultural industries. And gosh, I don't blame them. I'd want to come here too. But when 10% of Mexico's population has now relocated to the United States illegally, it's a thorny problem that we just simply have to do the best we can to address.
You've sponsored many pieces of education legislation since you came to the General Assembly back in 2003. So where does the Hope Scholarship fit into all of this?
The Hope will be a big one. This has been coming because we have far more students attending our technical colleges and our other 35 colleges, in addition to rising tuition rates because there's been less state support because we've had, I guess, 6 down years out of the last 9. That the intersection of lottery revenues, which are slightly depressed, with greater demand, those lines have crossed. And we do have to further ration those more scarce and more demanded lottery dollars. But I've been working with the Senate and the governor, and there is an absolute consensus that we will preserve, protect, Hope. I think even enhance it and frankly make it a better program than it was. And Georgians all over the state will continue to have that as a foundational. I mean, you know, the Hope really brands Georgia. I think it's the most effective scholarship program in the country, but its success has outstripped the available dollars. But I think you'll see a fair tweaking and a fair plan that parents will be able to count on and that will encourage their students to try harder and do well in high school and in college.
Does that mean that you're leaning towards raising the GPA requirements on the Hope?
Well, I don't know that we will be raising the GPA. We don't want to put any incentives in place for grade inflation. I think it will be directed more at rigor and making sure that students are in fact prepared for college, and that's in their best interest. You know, if they go on to college, and we want them to aspire to go to a technical college or to a college, and to in fact not just aspire, but to go and learn skills that are useful. But we know that there is a lack of rigor by a lot of students who are qualifying for Hope, and so we'll be trying to address that.
Well, before I let you go, I've got to ask, you're the highest ranking woman in Georgia General Assembly history. I'm wondering, what do you think the significance of women achieving the posts such as you have?
Well, you know, when I ran for office, I guess 9 years ago, I never thought of myself as the female running for office. But when I got here, you know, there are fewer women. I think we have about 20% of the House is female. The significance is that our legislature represents all people of all economic segments, either gender, all cultural and racial aspects that make up Georgia. And you know, I to this day, I don't think of myself as the female pro tem. I just do the job that I was elected to do. But I do know that it does send a message to young girls that there are no barriers, and I did not feel that there was a barrier or a glass ceiling in me achieving this. I just don't think that many women had seen themselves in that capacity, and that's what we want all Georgians to see, that they can see themselves in many roles, including that as a legislator, shaping policy for their state, or in leadership. You know, we also have the first female minority leader, Stacey Abrams, who I expect will do a great job. And that was, you know, it was kind of exciting when they announced her name at the first meeting I went to, and I thought, wow, another first. The significance of that is the next time around, you know, it really won't make much of the news.
Representative Jan Jones is the Speaker Pro Tem in the House of Representatives. Thanks so much for joining us here on Primetime Lawmakers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Iwandi. There's more to come tonight on Primetime Lawmakers. When we come back, I'll be talking with Tom Crawford from the Georgia Report about this week under the Gold Dome. Then Senator Nan Orrock will join us in studio to discuss developments with immigration reform legislation. Stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. It's the end of the legislative week, and that means it's time to check in with Tom Crawford from the Georgia Report. I caught up with Tom today on the set of Primetime Lawmakers. We'll have a special budget broadcast tomorrow night, but tonight I'm asking Tom if things have returned to the normal pace after the ice storm from a few weeks ago.
Still moving at a glacial pace, Scott, but there are a couple of issues on which we're showing some progress.
I would think one of those would be immigration. What's new there?
That's correct. Bills have been introduced in the House and Senate. The House bill is moving quickly through committee. It'll have a hearing tomorrow, maybe a vote as early as next week or the week after, so that one is moving right along.
Does this contain the new E-Verify rules that they're looking for? 5 employees or more have to be verified?
Yes, public and private employers would have to run the names of their employees through the E-Verify system to check their citizenship status. That's correct.
And is this also the one that mimics so-called the Arizona law?
Yeah, very similar to what Arizona enacted last year, yes.
Have they put something in there to avoid the kind of lawsuits the Arizona law has attracted?
Well, they say it will stand up to any challenge, but that's probably easier said than done. It'll wind up in court somewhere.
Another hot button issue, Sunday sales seems to be sailing.
It is. The Sunday sales bill came out of a Senate committee yesterday. It will get a vote in the full Senate, I predict, this week, and that one, I think, will head to Governor Deal's desk at some point before the end of the session.
So they could be holding referendums locally on Sunday alcohol sales as soon as next year.
Or even this year, later this year, perhaps.
Another subset of the immigration tact is a bill drop for English-only driver's license exams. Is that right?
That's right. They have tried to pass that before. They've got the bill up again. I believe it was discussed in committee this week, so we may be seeing a vote on that one as well.
Veto override popped into the news this past week.
You don't see it very often, but the the Senate voted to override a veto by Governor Sonny Perdue of a zero-based budgeting bill. The House declined to act on it, but they said we'll take up a bill similar to that before the end of the session.
Federal judge in Florida ruled in favor of that massive lawsuit challenging health care reform that included Georgia, and we got reaction in Georgia, but was it much more than just reaction?
Well, they're still at the start of a long process there because eventually this will wind up before the Supreme Court for a final decision, and that could take as long as 2 years. So Still very early in the process there, but if you're opposed to the Health Care Act, certainly it was a ruling that you'll applaud.
Meanwhile, the provisions that are already in effect are still in effect. Some very
Yes.
popular provisions like pre-existing conditions for children, that sort of thing.
Correct, and the Obama administration is going to continue to move ahead with implementation of the new act, regardless of what the courts say for the moment.
Will there be any budget moves anytime soon?
The House will be voting on the mid-year supplemental budget, I think, this upcoming week, and that's an important step because once they get that out of the way, they can work on the main budget for the next fiscal year, and that one's going to be a very tough one for them.
And overall atmosphere under the cooperation or toxic?
Well, toxic in the Senate where there's been a bit of a leadership fight, but I think there's pretty collegial everywhere else. They're doing okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Oh, great to be here.
Tom Crawford's the editor of the Georgia Report. He joins us at the end of each legislative week here on Primetime Lawmakers. Now we turn to our immigration discussion. 2 new pieces of immigration legislation have come out of a special committee on immigration reform. Last week, Representative Ramsey introduced a bill he says puts common sense reforms into Georgia's immigration laws. HB 87, the Illegal Immigration Reform and Enforcement Act, would require private employers in the state to use the federally Verify program to ensure legal status of employees. And today, Senator Jack Murphy announced details of his immigration bill, SB 40. Senator Murphy's legislation increases punishment on state contractors who fail to use E-Verify to check their employees' legal status, as well as requiring private businesses use the system. It also authorizes state enforcement officers to ask for immigration documents from persons stopped for probable cause of a crime. To go behind the legislation tonight, I'm joined on set by Senator Nan Orrock of Atlanta. Senator Orrock is an advocate for working families. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. And I should mention our intention tonight, obviously, was to have a sponsor of one of the immigration bills to join us as well. But that wasn't possible this evening, despite our best efforts. But I want to make every effort we can to at least shed some light on what's going on behind this legislation. And I think any discussion is better than no discussion. How about you?
Good to be with you. I'm sorry we couldn't get someone from across the aisle tonight, but maybe in the future.
In the words of Senator Jack Murphy, the sponsor of SB 40, do you want immigration reform or not?
I have spoken with Senator Murphy. Of course, we serve together in the Senate, and my answer resoundingly is we desperately need immigration reform. I introduced a resolution last year to urge Congress to proceed immediately with comprehensive legislation and reform of our immigration system. It's a broken system. We have done a lot of strides on securing our borders. That's a positive thing. But we have a situation. I talked to a developer from North Georgia who served in the Senate with me. He says after February or March, all of the guest worker permits are gone. When you want someone, when we're in a robust period in our economy, which we're not now, people actually have a problem securing a workforce that's coming through the legal channels. So that's one part of our broken system. We also have 11 million people who are here illegally, and we need to create a pathway for those folks to bring forward, come out of the dark, register, apply for status, have criminal background checks, learn English, and pay their taxes.
But you're saying that's a federal problem, not a state problem.
That's exactly right. The best thing we could do is our state leaders at the Gold Dome could urge and work with our congressional delegation to work with the President and the Congress to move forward in a bipartisan fashion to address this problem. Right now, states are doing patchwork things. The Arizona law has been pretty much of a disaster out there. It sounds good to folks who think something needs to be done, but in fact, it's consuming state tax dollars, fighting lawsuits. But secondly, they've lost $150 million in tourism and
conventions
visitors.
not going.
That's right. And you know, I'm an Atlantan, and Atlanta and Georgia depend on tourism and conventions. I mean, I think it brings in $35 billion a year to our economy, and I view these pieces of legislation as job killers. Our economy is at a very delicate place. We know we have a very high rate of unemployment. We're going to kill more jobs when we have conventions canceled, hotels that don't need their staff, restaurants that don't need their staff. We don't want to do something that's ill-considered and has the wrong results, which is to kill jobs and to harm our economy.
So this isn't the state's business, really. It's not that you have a problem with this bill particularly. You have a problem with the state getting involved in immigration.
I think the bills are very ill-advised. We've got a bill that says if you hire a person who doesn't have papers, if you hire an illegal immigrant without legal status on your job, and they get hurt on your job, they're denied compensation, workers' compensation, the program to deal with injured workers.
Well,
That sounds great, doesn't it? What we're doing is incenting employers to hire people that they don't have to pay workers' comp into the system on, and actually an injured worker or a worker that's killed digging a trench or whatever the kinds of industrial accidents that happen, you've got big lawsuits.
On the other side of the economic impact picture, though, all right, it cost a lot of money to have illegal immigrants in the state of Georgia. I think Senator Murphy used a figure of $563 million just for education of the children of illegal immigrants in this state. So isn't there a huge downside as well?
The downside, the numbers, I don't know where. I asked Senator Murphy today where did he get his numbers, and I haven't had that answered yet. But people act as though hardworking immigrant workforce is here doing nothing, sitting around throwing dice. No, people are out working every day. You know, they're working in construction industry. They are the backbone. Saxby Chambliss, our U.S. Senator, says that over 60% of the workforce in the fields across Georgia, in our agricultural sector of the economy, are people who are here without papers.
Well, the Farm Bureau is not exactly enthused about this, are they?
That's right. I mean, as I had a farmer from South Georgia, well-known, an expert in agriculture, and he says to me, who do they think is going to pick these Vidalia onions? Who's going to pick the pecans and the peaches? Who's going to be filling up Kroger's shelves up in Atlanta when you run everybody out of the state?
Well, what about
now, that is a fair question.
Yeah.
So people are working. Their taxes are being paid. People are in the carpet industry, the poultry industry. They're in every sector of our economy, and taxes are being paid on them that are being sent up to Washington by the employers. So this idea that people are not paying taxes is a notion. It's not a reality. And so when people come here, they're working, their taxes are being paid in their paycheck to the federal government, and their child goes to a public school.
What about out-of-work Georgians? I mean, you could argue that some of these jobs are being taken, and therefore the opportunity is being denied to people who already live here legally.
I will say to you, and I count on people that are working in the farming industry, and I count on people that are working in development who actually have to hire a workforce and get a job done, and they tell me they have to have immigrant labor because they cannot get labor of people that are not immigrants. And that's what they say. And they say, show me a person who's going to go down to South Georgia and work in the hot sun and pull Vidalia onions all day, pick peaches, pick pecans. There's a reason that immigrant workforce is there, and that is that the jobs are here and other people are not taking those jobs. And that's what employers tell me.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how all the numbers really do fall out, including Senator Murphy's numbers, all the other numbers that are floating around on liability versus benefit. And hopefully that'll come out in the debate here in the next
Well,
few
and
weeks.
we can look at Arizona and see that their economy has taken a hit from passing bills that don't make good sense. We all need to be with one voice calling on Washington and asking our members of Congress to do the job of reforming the entire system on immigration.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming in and spending this time with us. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Thanks for your service
Wonderful.
as well. And that's all the time we have for this evening. As I mentioned earlier, we'll attempt to present an opposing viewpoint of this issue at a future program. The General Assembly isn't in session tomorrow, so primetime lawmakers will not be seen at 7, but tune in for primetime politics instead. Tomorrow's program features the budget. That's tomorrow night at 7 on GPB. When Primetime Lawmakers returns on Monday, we'll bring you another installment in our leadership interview series. House Minority Whip Carolyn Hewley is scheduled to appear, plus in-depth analysis on important legislative issues and the latest Capitol news. Primetime Lawmakers returns Monday, February 7th at 7 p.m. If you'd like to see a repeat of this broadcast, Primetime Lawmakers will be seen at 5:30 tomorrow morning on GPB. Coming up next on GPB, Georgia Outdoors, Unearthing the Past. Join Sharon Collins as she discovers archaeology in Georgia. Georgia Outdoors is next on GPB. And that's our broadcast for the 10th legislative day of the 2011 session. Thanks to our guests for joining us tonight. For Wendy Lawson and the whole Primetime Lawmakers team, I'm Scott Slade. Tune in Monday. Have a good night.
This is a GPB original production.